Welcome, everyone, to vpod.ai. Get ready for a deep dive with us today. We're exploring some really specific material on a fascinating and potentially life altering topic. We're going to unpack something that can be hidden, kind of deep inside the body, linked to your main artery, something that poses a pretty serious risk if it's overlooked. And hey, before we properly jump in, just want to mention that this deep dive is sponsored by StoneFly. StoneFly provides really essential products and services, all focused on data storage and security solutions. They basically help organizations manage and protect their valuable information, making sure critical data is safe. We'll touch on a specific Stonefly solution a bit later, but for now, let's zero in on this health topic. We're talking about an enlarged area potentially developing in the lower part of that really vital main artery, the aorta. Sounds serious, and well, it can be, but understanding the risks, uncovering this kind of knowledge, that's exactly what we're here to do today. So let's get right into it. Looking at the material we have, how does it actually define this specific type of aneurysm? What exactly is it?
All right, good starting point. So this is what's known as an abdominal aortic aneurysm, or sometimes just AAA for short. Think of your aorta like the body's main highway for blood. Yeah, it runs from your heart down through your chest and into your abdomen, your belly area. And AAA is essentially a weak spot in the wall of that lower part. It starts to bulge out, kind of like a balloon that's inflating where it shouldn't.
A bulge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what's particularly tricky, and the material points this out right away, is that these often grow really slowly. For a long time, often they don't cause any symptoms, none at all.
Growth symptoms. Wow.
Yeah, many stay small, which is generally okay, but some can grow bigger, and sometimes that growth can be quite quick. Now, not all of them will rupture, but the big danger, the really life-threatening part, is if that bulge gets too big or too weak and, well, it tears open.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. That no symptoms part is kind of surprising, isn't it? If you don't feel anything, how would anyone even know they have this? What does the material say about, why it's so hard to spot, or if there are any signs at all?
You've really hit the nail on the head there, that silent nature is the core problem initially. It's genuinely tricky because, like the info confirms, often there are just no symptoms. Not until it gets significantly large or starts causing complications.
Right.
However, if the aneurysm does start to get bigger, then yes, symptoms can develop. The material we have points to a few specific things someone might notice. One is a deep, sort of constant pain in the belly area, or maybe off to the side.
Okay.
Back pain is another possibility. And sometimes people might feel a kind of throbbing or pulsing sensation, usually near their belly button.
A pulsing near the belly button.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And this is why the material is so clear on this point. If you do experience pain, especially if it comes on suddenly and is really bad, that's a signal. You need to get medical help right away, immediately.
Okay.
Because that kind of intense pain could mean the aneurysm's becoming unstable or worse, has actually ruptured. And that's an emergency. It's definitely a condition where knowing your risk is often more critical than waiting for a symptom to appear.
That makes sense. Here's where it gets really interesting for me. The why. What does the material tell us about why someone might develop this? What are the underlying causes that actually weaken that aortic wall? And who's more likely to be affected?
Good questions. The material lists several contributing factors. A major one is something called atherosclerosis, basically, hardening of the arteries.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Right. It's essentially a buildup of fat and other gunk inside the artery walls. Over time, that can weaken them. High blood pressure is also right up there. Puts constant stress on the aorta's walls, potentially damaging them.
Makes sense.
Constant pressure.
Exactly. Certain blood vessel diseases that cause inflammation or swelling can also play a role. Less commonly, maybe an infection in the aorta itself could weaken it. And sometimes physical trauma, like a really bad injury from, say, a car accident, that could potentially be a cause too.
Okay.
But then when we look at who is most likely to get one, the material points to some very clear risk factors. All right, let's dive into those then. Who should be particularly aware of this potential issue?
This is where the information gets really practical for people listening. The absolute strongest risk factor identified in the material is tobacco use.
Smoking.
Smoking, chewing tobacco.
Yeah.
Any of it. It significantly weakens the walls of your blood vessels, makes them much more susceptible to this kind of bulging.
Wow.
It's such a powerful link, in fact, that the material even gives a specific screening recommendation based on it.
Oh, really? What's that?
It says men aged 65 to 75 who have ever smoked should have a one-time ultrasound screening for AAA. It really highlights how strong that connection is.
That's quite specific. Shows the level of risk.
Definitely. Other key risk factors include age. It's most common in people 65 and older. Sex is a big one. Men develop these much, much more often than women.
Interesting.
Being white is also listed as putting someone in a higher risk group. And family history.
Yeah.
If someone in your close family has had an AAA, your own risk goes up considerably.
Right, genetic.
And also, if you've had other aneurysms in large blood vessels, maybe in the chest part of the aorta or even behind the knee, you're also at a higher risk for one developing in the abdomen.
Okay, so a pattern can emerge.
It seems so. The material also mentions that if you do have these risk factors, your doctor might talk about medicines, things to help manage blood pressure, for instance, which can reduce some of that stress on the arteries.
So let's talk about the dangers then. What does this all mean if it goes wrong? The material mentions complications, and that sounds like where things get really serious. What are those key complications we need to understand?
Yeah, this is where the stakes become very, very clear. The main worry with an abdominal aortic aneurysm, as the material details, is definitely the risk of rupture.
Rupture. Okay.
Now, sometimes before a full rupture, you might get what's called an aortic dissection. That's more like a tear within the layers of the aorta's wall. Still serious, but rupture is the most critical complication.
Got it.
When that aneurysm actually tears open, it causes severe, life-threatening bleeding inside the body. It's a massive internal hemorrhage. And the material really emphasizes this. The risk of it rupturing is directly tied to how big the aneurysm is and how fast it's growing. Bigger and faster means higher risk. Simple as that.
Okay. And are there signs of a rupture?
Yes,
Yeah.
and they're severe and demand immediate, urgent attention. We're talking sudden, incredibly bad, persistent pain in the belly or back. Sometimes people describe it as a tearing or ripping feeling.
Oh, wow.
And it's usually accompanied by signs of that internal bleeding, things like very low blood pressure or really fast pulse. It's a true medical emergency. The material also brings up another potential complication. These aneurysms can increase the risk of blood clots forming inside that bulging area.
Ah, okay.
If a piece of that clot breaks off, it can travel down the bloodstream and block smaller vessels. That could cause pain or serious problems in, say, the legs, toes, kidneys, or even parts of the digestive system, cutting off blood flow.
Okay. Hearing about rupture and clots is definitely sobering. But it sounds like the material doesn't just leave us with the scary stuff. It also gives us steps we can take, right? How can someone maybe reduce their risk of getting one or manage one they have to stop it getting worse?
Exactly. No, it's not all doom and gloom. The information provided does lay out a clear path for prevention and management. It really focuses on overall vascular health, which, directly impacts the aorta.
Good. What are the key things?
Well, top of the list, and it makes perfect sense after what we just discussed about risk factors, is absolutely avoid tobacco.
Right. Number one.
Don't smoke. Don't use chewing tobacco, and even try to avoid secondhand smoke. The material is really firm on this. It even suggests getting help from your doctor or healthcare team if quitting is tough.
Crucial point. What else?
Eating a healthy diet, that's another key step. Focus on, the good stuff. Lots of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins, low-fat dairy. And try to avoid saturated and trans fats. Limit your salt intake. All those things help keep your whole cardiovascular system healthier.
Standard healthy heart advice, really.
Pretty much, yeah. And keeping your blood pressure and cholesterol under control is vital. If you're on medication for these, taking them exactly as directed is crucial. High numbers put that extra strain right on your arteries.
Makes sense. Manage the pressure.
And finally, getting regular exercise.
Yeah.
Strongly recommended. The material suggests aiming for at least 150 minutes of moderate aerobic activity each week. Things like brisk walking, swimming, cycling.
Okay.
And importantly, if you're not active now, it advises starting slowly, building up gradually. And always, always check with your doctor or healthcare team about what kind of activities are safe and appropriate for you. These steps taken together really do address many of the underlying causes and risks we talked about earlier.
Wow. Okay. That really covers the landscape, doesn't it? We've gone from understanding what this abdominal aortic aneurysm actually is, that sort of hidden bulge in the main artery, through its often silent nature, the signs that might eventually show up, the key causes, and those really significant risk factors like tobacco use, the serious potential for complications like rupture, and then finally, these practical steps we can actually take to protect ourselves. It just hammers home how crucial awareness is, especially if those risk factors apply to you or someone you know, because, well, waiting for symptoms might just be too late in some cases.
It truly does. It underscores the importance of proactive health knowledge, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And when you think about it, for a condition that so often lacks early warning signs, it raises an interesting question to maybe leave people with.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
Well, if symptoms are unreliable early on, How does simply knowing and acting on the risk factors become perhaps the most powerful form of prevention and early detection available for many people? It kind of flips the usual script on health awareness, relying on risk knowledge rather than waiting for a signal from your body.
Huh. That's a really good point. Definitely something to think about long after this deep dive finishes. Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
And once again, a big thank you to our sponsor, StoneFly. For organizations looking for really robust data security and storage solutions, you should check out their 100 TB immutable and air-gapped SSO NAS. It offers secure, large-capacity storage specifically designed to protect against modification and network threats, and it's all managed via single sign-on. You can actually get this specific solution for $8,995. So that's the 100 TB immutable and air-gapped SSO NAS from StoneFly for $8,995. And that wraps up this deep dive. We'll see you next time for another exploration.